In this video, we're going to make a desk caddy or desk organizer. I just need somewhere to put my pens and pieces while I'm sitting at my desk here because they get all over the place. And so I just want a little tray. I have some leftover plywood that I'm going to make it out of. I could 3D print it, but honestly, 3D printing would take much longer and it wouldn't be as much fun. So I'm going to just create it from this old scrap plywood that I have. I'm going to layer it up. So I only have to do 2 designs. Then I'll layer those designs up and make that on the CNC router. So the first thing I'm going to do is sketch out the base shape. I did already do some preliminary shapes just to see what it looked like. I haven't cut one yet, but I'm going to probably do that this evening. So I know the base of it is just going to look like this. It's going to have a couple of holes, dowel holes in it, just to line everything up. And there are going to be some radii in the corners, just to give it some shape. So this would be the base, and isn't going to have any holes in it, of course, other than these dowel holes. So that's about the size of it. And I'm going to constrain it quickly. I am going to use this point and this point to my center. Just make that symmetrical. I know that these radii need to be 20. And I know that this, and this are all going to be equal. And then finally my dimensions, I'm going to dimension this guy across here. He's going to be 230 millimeters. And I'm going to dimension this way. And he's going to be 130 millimeters. And then I know I actually already figured out that these holes are going to be 220 millimeters. Centers. And of course, they're going to be symmetrical around this line. And I already figured out that the height of them needs to be 7 millimeters from the center. And the diameter needs to be 6.4. That's the size of my dowel pins. And this one and this one are going to be equal. And that's basically it. So if I close that and pad it, all my pads are going to be 4 millimeters thick because that's how thick my plywood is. And just bring that to the center. And there you can see the base shape. And it's that simple. Okay, the next part, and I'm actually going to create a new part. So because I'm going to CNC route it, you want to have them separate parts so you can put the jobs in those parts. So I'm going to create a new part with a new body. And I'm going to make this the active body. And create a sketch. Apparently I didn't make it the active body. Now it's the active body. Create a sketch. XY plane. And it's going to be the same outside shape as this. So I'm actually going to turn that off for a minute. And back to the sketch. We're just basically going to sketch the same outside shape. So I'm not taking the time to show you all the details on this outside shape. I'm just going to put in my radii between there there, there, and there. So if you want to see more details on just the sketching part, look at some of my other videos. Again, this video is going to concentrate more on creating the paths. I will create an assembly. I'm going to show you what it looks like in assembly. So we'll do some Assembly4 on here just quick, just to show you how that works. So as far as constraining, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to constrain this point and this point around this point, and I'm going to just dimension those radii. We know they were 20. There we go. So we're going to go that guy, and that guy. So they're all equal. And we're going to put our holes in here. It doesn't matter where you put them as long as you don't put them directly on this line, because it will create a constraint and lock them to that line. You don't want to do that. So we know that the dimension from there to there is 7 mil, just the same as we did. So those are our alignment holes. So it's important that they're in the same place, because that's going to line everything up. And we know that's a symmetrical constraint. We know dimensionally we want those to be 6.4. So the dowel should go in there fairly easily. We're going to make those equal. So that's that part, and the outside dimension for that we know is 230, and the outside dimension for that we know is 130. And we also know this dimension between these two holes is 220. Now it's just the cutouts that we want to put in. So we want to make a cutout for. I'm just going to move some of these dimensions out of the way. We want to make the cutout for pieces to sit in the actual tray that's going to hold all the parts. So what I want is a square or a rectangle that goes in here, smaller rectangle that goes in here. I'm just being careful not to actually place it on any point so it doesn't constrain onto those points. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some radii up here, down here, down here. I'm going to constrain those radii to be 8. And I'm going to make that one, and that one, and that one, and that one all equal. Then I know I want this, and I'm going to leave these as square corners. Of course, we're going to cut them with a round cutter, so they will have a slight radius on them, but I'm not going to show that. It's not necessary. So I'm going to make this guy 60. So that's how big I want that. And I want the outside dimension for that to be 210. And I want that guy to be symmetrical in the middle. So I'm going to go with this point, this point. I still have the dimension line on. This point, and this guy, and say symmetrical. Sometimes with the red dot on there, I can't see that the dimension is still showing up on my cursor, so I forget to right click it, so that's why I just had to redo that. What we're going to do then is we are going to position this. We want it to be positioned so that the dimension between that line and that line, that's actually the wrong one, hold on, that one and that one is 10. So I'll pull it up, and that's where we want it to sit. And then for this guy, we're going to dimension him. He's going to be 56. That's good. And just look in to make sure I got my dimensions right. Oh, I want to align this guy and this guy. So I'll just hit those with a vertical alignment. And I'm going to align this one and this one with a vertical alignment. And I'm going to make a gap between this one and this one. I'm going to make that gap 8. And I am going to align this one and this one horizontally. I'm actually going to dimension that gap between them because I want there to be a gap between them. I'm just looking at my sketch, and I think I may have one of the dimensions here set up incorrectly. I think that 10 dimension. Let's see if we can find that guy. There he is there. I can pull him out here. I think he should only be 8. There we go. That looks better. And I think my 56 dimension might be miscalculated too. We want to go from here to here. I'm going to go with that as 8. Just going to push that down, and then what I actually want is not for that to be 56. It should be 46 is that dimension there. Miscalculated by 10. There we go. And then that guy and that guy, they should be horizontal. It's about time we did a save here because we don't want to lose anything. And what else do we need to dimension? This one, this one, and this one. We're going to dimension that, and it's going to be 160. There. And that is my tray. So I'm going to close that. So we're going to pad this one 4 millimeters, the same. And then we're going to go back to our tree. And now we're just going to give these some descriptive names. So I'm just going to rename that. I'm going to call it my divider part. My divider body. You can call them whatever you want, doesn't matter. And I'm going to call this my divider pad. I generally leave the pad body part pieces in the names, just so you make sure you know what's what. And this one I'm going to call my base part. And this one I'm going to call my base body. And finally, I'm going to call this my base pad. Okay, and so that is my two parts. And I'm going to use these two parts. I'm going to create multiples of them. So I think from what I've seen so far, I'm just going to create one base. And then I'm going to create 7 of these dividers. And what we're going to do now is we are going to close this guy up here. And we're going to save it. And then we're going to create a new assembly just so that we can see what it looks like. So we're going to go into Assembly4 quickly. So in Assembly4, we have the Desk Caddy assembly and the Desk Caddy basic models. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply some LCSs to these guys. So we're going to add an LCS. We're going to call this LCS front. And we're just going to put it on this hole here. These are our alignment holes, so we want to put it on the hole. Say it's concentric. It's important that you click that concentric. You'll see the LCS is right there. Apply, say OK. And now we have the front part of this base. And we're only going to have one base, so we only need one LCS for that. So close that, turn that off, turn the divider part on. I'm going to create an LCS for that. I'm going to call it LCS front. And I'm going to apply it to that same circle on the front edge. I'm going to make it concentric. Say apply, say OK. And then we're going to do one more. So we're going to go to the part and we're going to add another one and we're going to call this back. Now, because we want them to stack up on top of each other, what we're going to do is we're going to put this one on the back here. Concentric again. Apply, say OK. And if you look, now we have one LCS. If I show you close up, we have one LCS sticking up there and one is back here. So we have one on the front and one on the back. So that's all we need to do for that. We are going to turn that guy off. Close that, go into our Desk Caddy assembly. Ignore any messages, errors, whatever. I'm going to start a new model. And then I'm going to link in my models. So I'm going to hit link, Desk Caddy part. I'm just going to call it part 1 in case I wanted to put a second part in, but I'm just going to call it part 1. And take the front of that. Going to put it into the parent assembly onto its origin, and just because I wanted it sideways, I'm going to rotate it through the Z as it comes in and say OK. So now I have in my assembly, I just have that base, and now I want to add a divider. So we're going to go back to our assembly, going to link in a divider part. I'm going to call that part 1, say insert. It's going to be the back of part 1 is going to go to the front of the base part. So if you look here, you'll see it's actually going to come in on top of it. And it's exactly where we want it. And then we go here, we're going to link in another one, another divider part. We're going to call this 2, insert. And we're going to say the back of that one is going to connect to the front of the one above it. So there, say OK, and you get the picture here. We're going to just keep adding. So I'm going to add another one, call that 3, insert the back of that to the front of that, and one more. Right part, it's actually doing part 4 for me. Insert back of that, it's going to go to the front of that, And so how many do I have? 4, so I want 5. Insert, back to the front. Say okay, and then 6. Insert to the back to the front. Say okay. Last one, insert part 7 to the back to the front, and we are all good. And so this is what our assembly is going to look like, and we should be able to see that the holes are all perfectly lined up, all the parts are lined up. And now out of these 4mm pieces of scrap wood, I'll have a little tray that I can put my stuff in, which is basically what I'm trying to do here. So that is the assembly. Then I'm just going to save that. And I'm going to save my Desk Caddy file. Notice the way that we linked them, everything's still in this file now. So when you link them that way, everything is a link. You can see, if you look closely here, you can see it's a link to those parts. And those parts are automatically put in the model that way. So there's our assembly, all finished. I don't need any animation because I'm not going to animate this assembly. Now we're going to go on and do our path work, and we're going to do that in Desk Caddy. So what I'm going to do is close my assembly, and that is all done. And now I'm going to create the path information in my original model. So this should be straightforward. I'm going to do the base body first. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to go into this base part. We're going to drop into our path workbench. And we're going to create a new path. And it's going to be our base part is going to be in there. We'll say okay. And let's give it a second while it sets everything up. There we go. And I'm going to leave my LCS in the middle. So when I start my job, I'm going to have my job in my set block here. I'm going to move to the middle of where I want this to cut out. So that's where we're going to start from. I'm not going to extend my model's bounds, so I'm going to make all of those 0. So I don't need any complications on there. And then a couple of things that we can do from the start is we can add a tool. I'm just going to do all of this with a 1/4 inch milling cutter. If you want to see the one that I use, I'll actually put a link below. And actually that's from my Amazon affiliate account. So if you click on that link and you purchase that one, that will help me. It's up to you if you want to do that, but I would appreciate it. So this is my 1/4 inch cutter. I'm going to get rid of the default tool. That way we don't have to do any selection there. And then in general, we can see it has the base part is selected. That's all good. My output, I'm using my MPCNC post processor. That's the one that I modified from the Gerbil post processor to work with my particular router. It works with the Marlin board. And so that's what we're using there. On this guy, everything looks good. On here, we look good. On our work plan, on our defaults, everything looks good. So the only thing I want to set is my start depth. It's under the setup tab. Right at the bottom, it says defaults. And I'm going to set up my start depth to be 0. My final depth is going to be -4 because that's how thick my material is. And my step down is going to be 4 because I want it to do it in one cut. And my clearance and everything's good, and I don't use any coolant. So that's everything is good now. So we can in the job, we only have our tool. We can set up an operation. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this. I'm going to use this guy up here to select the whole outside edge. And we can cut the outside edge. It's going to be our 1/4 mil. We want it to go outside, not inside in this case. Our heights are set at 3 and 5. Our depths are set at, start depth is set incorrectly. It's starting at 4 and it's ending at 0. Now I noticed that this comes up this way, but if you just go in here and just say OK, now it'll go to those defaults that I set, which was 0, -4, with a step down of 4. So that's all good. There's my geometry, says the whole outside. I'm going to apply that. You can see that it's actually cutting the outside, and that's all good. Then the next part I want to do is I want to cut this and this. Didn't get the right part there. Let me just do that again. So I'm going to cut this. And hold down Control and click that one. Now I should have them both selected. I'm going to just do the same thing. It's just going to be a profile, and this time it is inside. And my heights, my depths, it can do that trick. So I just touch this, click OK, and it goes to my defaults, and then say Apply, and say OK. Now, one thing you might notice is that in my operations, I'm doing this outside first, which will release that piece, and then I need to cut those holes. So that's really the wrong way around. I want to switch those around so I can go in my job, go into my work plan, go to that profile 1, which is the second profile, click up, say OK, and now it's going to do these holes first, and then it'll do this outside edge. So on the outside edge, I also want to say we're going to add the tag dress up, and there are the tags. There are 4 of them. I think the default is fine. You can have more if you want. You can add more, you can add less. You can individually turn them on and off, and you can change the width. I'm going to do a 3 mil tab, 1.5 millimeter high. That looks like it'll work perfectly fine for this part. And then finally I'm going to save it before I do this, but I can do a simulation of this part, and I'm going to run it, and you should see it go make the holes, then it's going to go do the outside, and it's done. It's going to be in one cut because it's only 4 millimeters deep, and it's a 6.3 millimeter cutter, so we should have no problem in cutting that in one go. So that's essentially the bottom part. Now I'm going to turn off that part. I'm going to turn off this job, turn off all of everything I can, so I make a nice clean go of it. And I'm going to turn on my divider part, and we are going to select that divider part and create a new job. And you see it only has the divider part in it. We say OK. And so once again, I'm not going to add any extra material. And I'm going to change up my tool. Get rid of the default tool. And I'm going to go to my setup. So my defaults. So you can't, it's hard to see there because I have this gray box in the way, but there's a default values button here. So I click that, and I'm going to make that 0, -4, and 4. And everything else looks great. It's okay. And then we are in job 1, so we're going to open that guy, and here we go. We're going to add an operation, That one works. So I'm going to actually rename these guys. I'm going to call this holes. And I'm going to rename this one to large cut. I'm going to select this one, do the same thing. So I am breaking it up into smaller pieces because it gave it a headache. I don't like that. Same thing again. Apply. I'm going to call this one medium cut. Select this one. Use this little guy again. Hit that. Job 1. I'm going to say depth. And that's all good. So I'm going to call that small cut. And then finally, we're going to select this outside edge. And job 1. Yeah, should be outside, not inside. Remember, the profile is going to be the outside. All these are the inside. The profile is the outside. So we just want to make sure we're cutting on the outside. And we'll rename that to outside cut. And that's all good. And the reason I renamed these is so I can tell which one I'm doing what with. So I'm going to select the outside cut. I'm going to put that same tag dress up on it. Looks good as well. Apply that, say OK. And now we have the cutout for these. So I'm just going to do one and then put another one in, put another one in, and do it 7 times, and then I'll have all my pieces. So that is basically all the work we need to do to create our jobs. And then what we want to do is to export those. So we're going to take job 1 out. Actually, let me just cancel that a second. I want to make sure I'm doing the right job that I'm putting out. So we're going to do job 1. Going to rename that job. Base job. And rename that, we'll call that divider job. Those 2 jobs are done. Now we're going to output that. And I have a G-code file here, and I'm going to call this Desk Caddy base job. There we go. .G-code. Save that. Let's take a quick look. Profile 1. Da, 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 da. And that's all it does. That looks very good. And I'm going to take this one and output this one, and it's going to be called divider job. Save that. Let's take a quick look, make sure it makes sense. So begin fixture, begin holes, and begin large cut, begin medium cut, begin small cut, and begin dress up tag. Boop. And there it is. So that all looks great. So now I have two jobs to cut. I'm going to cut the base job and the divider job, and we'll do that on the router, and we'll catch you there. So the first thing is to use my Z-stop. So what I do is I use my Z-stop to set the height, and that's set up in my Octoprint so that it sets a point of 19.3 millimeters, and that's the height of that stop, which means I'm exactly at the top surface of the wood. If you want to find one of those, I've got a link below where you can purchase those. They're really cheap and they work really well. So I cut the first parts I cut was the divider piece. That's the most complex part. I did, after I cut one, I did go back and change the G-code a little bit. I made it a little faster. I only cut 2 millimeters deep on each cut, but I did it at 500 millimeters per second, which means, sorry, 500 millimeters per minute, which means it was going a good deal faster and not cutting as deep. And I just did 2 cuts for each one. And then I also added a ramp in, and I also added tags to the inside of each piece so they stayed in place, because when I cut the first one I used that as a way to see what else I could improve, which I always do, and just went back and quickly changed it. It wasn't much of a change. I will put a link to the file if you actually want my file. You can take a look at it and you can mess with it, and you can look at the G-code stuff, the output from it. The cutter I'm using here is a carbide cutter from SPE. Again, there's a link down below if you're interested in one of those. All my links are to Amazon, and just for full disclosure, they're from my Amazon affiliate program. So if you buy it from there, I'll get a small stipend, not very much, but at least it's something to help me to offset the cost of producing the video. So if you do that, I'd appreciate it. One thing I do recommend on any CNC setup is an emergency stop button, and that saved me a few times where I thought I had everything set up right, started cutting, and of course it went off and did something different. It's much safer to have that button just hit it. Mine, when I hit it, it stops everything moving and spinning. So my router stops, my CNC all stops, nothing is moving once I hit that button. And then to reset it, I just stop the button, lift it back up, and reconnect to the CNC in Octoprint, and everything goes back and works fine. I do have to normally reset my 0 points and all that good stuff, but that's pretty easy with my setup. This was the final cut then for the base part, which basically is a solid piece, just an outline with the 2 alignment holes. I will say the alignment holes work perfectly. The dowels went straight in, aligned everything, got everything lined up, and everything, all the edges looked good. Easy once all together, just to give them a little sand just to complete anything. But to be honest, all the parts I made were all perfectly aligned with those holes lining them up, and the outside edges are all aligning. I was quite pleased with how it all turned out. So a few pictures at the end here just to show you what it came out like. And Obviously you can make anything, any kind of box with this type of technique by layering pieces of wood. It's a good way if you want to do with different pieces of wood, different different species of wood. So you can use like some oak and some maple, and you can layer them, and then you can get that nice finish of having different species together, and you get different colors and different effects. One of the beauties of wood over just 3D printing it is you do get all that view. Now obviously with plywood the edges are not as pretty as a solid piece of wood, but as I said before, this plywood was just scrap that I wanted to use, and I was able to use it, so it was at zero cost to me for the wood because I'd already scrapped it, and this worked out quite well because it just tidies up my desk nicely. Then finally I think it came out pretty well. It looks exactly as I expected it to. I just need to glue it up and finish it off. I put some stain on it and some lacquer, make it look the part, and it's all done. I just didn't want to wait to glue it all up before I posted this video because I'm already running late with it. As far as this video is concerned, if you've made it this far, you're a champion. I know it's a long one. I'm planning to do some intros, some basic FreeCAD intros for beginners. If that interests you, feel free to leave me a comment below. If there's something else you'd rather see, comment that too. I'm going to try and cover as much as I can that people request. Not always possible, but I'm doing my best to get there. A lot of people said they wanted to see modeling and routing, so here's a modeling and routing video for you, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so, and give this video a thumbs up. It means a lot. Thanks. Bye-bye.